Welcome to Westeros.org's bonus material and video review for Season 5 of Game of Thrones, and this is of course the first episode, The Wars to Come.
Yeah.
And today we are going to be discussing, Elio will start off with a little bit of background material on the Night's Watch and how they deal with Oathbreakers. Then we will quickly give our highs and lows, and then we'll have the full discussion of each story that is featured in this episode.
So obviously this episode ends the execution of Mance Rayder. Now this execution is normal in a way, and not normal in another way. Normal in a sense that if you're an Oathbreaker, a deserter from the Night's Watch, that is the fate you can expect if they ever get a hold of you. We see this in the first episode of the first season when Will is executed by Ned Stark, and this is a lawful execution of a man who deserted the Night's Watch. But it's abnormal in the sense that the method used is pretty much unknown to Westeros. It's burning people alive is not the norm in the Seven Kingdoms. It is something that has been brought over by Stannis and by Melisandre from the East, from the Relorian religion. There have been other methods of execution used, including a famous story of a son of Lord Ryswell, who with a number of other men decided to all desert from the Watch, and they made their way to the Rills, the seat of House Ryswell. Sure that they would find protection from his father who loved him and so on, and they're welcome to the Rills and immediately thrown into shackles and carried back to the Wall because Lord Ryswell couldn't stand the thought of his son falling so low and to besmirch the family honor and to make less of himself. And he turns them all over, and the Lord Commander at the time comes up with a particularly appropriate execution method. He has holes dug at the top of the wall, vertical shafts, and places each man in a shaft. And they basically buried alive to freeze to death, and to stand watch for eternity, as they could not in life. Now we're standing watch for eternity. Now the little coda to this is that when Lord Ryswell was old and seeing his death coming before him, he went to the wall and took the black and asked that he be buried up there on the wall beside his son, which I thought was a lovely little story from George. Yeah. So that is how executions happen. If you have been deserted, if you have betrayed the Watch in fashion, you can expect to die. There's not a lot of leniency. Jon Snow kind of got a bit lucky there in certain ways, that the situation proved him to not really have been a deserter, although not everyone necessarily believes that. But there's various methods to do it. Burning is not typically one of them. So to discuss highs and lows, let's start with the lows. What did you feel was your low point?
Well, there wasn't really anything that strongly stuck out either way here, but the low point for me would have to be the Loras Oliver with added Marjorie scene.
Oh, that was so cheesy. I thought it was incredibly cheesy.
It was really incredibly cheesy.
It's sort of sexy cheesy. It's kind of like they throw it in there because unapologetically at this point, it's clear they don't give a damn about the criticism. They want some sexy time, and I mean these episodes
halfway to True Blood is what I
halfway to True Blood.
Yeah.
So it's very cheesy. It doesn't feel to me right. It doesn't feel like it really captures.
I mean, neither Loras or Marjorie are anything like the characters in the books by this stage. There's nothing left really. There was never anything of Marjorie. Loras was kind of there to start with, and now there's really nothing left. I'd say they're completely different characters. But the problem is also, at least for this scene, they're not particularly well written characters. They're not particularly interesting characters. They're not.
I mean, I like a little bit of the sort of the dilemma, like, Marjorie doesn't want Cersei to marry Loras. Loras says, well, if she doesn't marry me, then we can't get her out of King's Landing, so you can have free reign. So
and then all the sort of the very overt her sitting there chewing on her apple or whatever fruit or whatever, and perhaps, and like it's telegraphing too much, and it's.
Well, I mean, I think that's they've been setting this up since prior seasons that Marjorie and Cersei are rivals. So I'm not bothered with, but it was just a cheesy, corny little scene, and
the cheesiness for me felt like it carried over into that part, the sort of I'm plotting here.
Now, I would say, just looking at the acting performances, I mean, Peter Dinklage and Conor LaFille are a great pairing. Dinklage does a fantastic job with being a surly, angry drunk who's sort of depressed and sort of just is self-destructive. And Varys, we'll discuss the weirdnesses of what Varys says along the way later on, but Conor LaFille remains the one actor who has really, we hear his voice when we read the books. He's the one character who's kind of transferred over and imprinted himself as Varys. So,
it's interesting that happened, but there's something about he has a very particular voice, and I think it's a very
and the manner, everything is perfect.
Yes, it's very particular.
So I think that's, and I personally, I know you disagree, but I like the John Mance scene. I feel, and we'll discuss this more later, I thought it captured something of the actual Mance from the books, which was sorely lacking in the previous seasons. I think they failed. They deliberately moved away. They tried to shape the character more to Karen Hines as the actor. Karen Hines is not somebody you go to for, the bard, the roguish, devil-may-care guy who takes bold risks. He didn't come off right. They obviously went for the gravitas, the Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
And he kind of gets it while adding that wildling roughness. But he didn't leap off the screen like Mance leapt off the page for many readers.
I found that scene really dissonant as well. So.
We'll discuss that a bit more, but that is our highs and lows.
Now for the story by story discussion, and we're going to start with a double dose of my favorite character.
Yes, Cersei. Cersei Lannister opens this. A much younger Cersei than we're used to seeing. The first, possibly the last ever flashback the show will do is Cersei's dream from A Feast for Crows, in which she remembers, suddenly after many years, it's something that she didn't remember, and it's sort of buried far back in the recesses of her mind, and now it's come forward with all that's happened, of a time that she and some friends went to see a witch. We discussed this in our impression of the first episode, sort of changes on. Don't have a lot to add, I think.
No, you wanted to make the correction that obviously we had only seen it at the world premiere then, didn't have a chance to rewatch it, and we had misremembered that they actually left after after Maggie the Frog finished her pronouncement with gold shall be their crowns and gold shall be their shrouds about Cersei's children. They don't actually leave, so technically there is room for it to continue into revealing more what was left out from the books. Yeah, but it didn't seem very likely.
It doesn't, that laugh Maggie has feels very final. Is the villainous ha ha ha. Now you wish you didn't ask me about this. So, and then that changes a little bit about what the prophecy is about, because in a prophecy,
didn't really have to go there to. It's kind of like the wise woman. Yes.
Blackadder. It changes. I mean, the prophecy in the book is about several things. It's about the fact that you're going to marry a king, but not the king you think you're going to marry.
Well, you're not going to marry the prince. You're going to marry.
Yes, exactly. Well, but basically, you're not going to marry
Rhaegar. You're going to marry Robert, and Robert's going to have lots of bastards, and you're going to have 3 children. Technically, she has 4 on the show. They kind of decided, well, infinite mortality, we're going to ignore that one.
Yeah. And Robert added a few extra.
I don't know. They like 20 as a number. And then, your children with golden hair and golden their shrouds, they'll die buried in Lannister gold or whatever.
Yeah. Well, the gold shall be their crowns. I mean, it implies that each of them will be crowned as well.
It does, doesn't it? Yes, it does.
It's not just hair color. It actually implies, and obviously in the books, we've seen 2 of them crowned for sure. The third, it's hard to. But
also use it in the figurative as a crown's head.
But I think they actually mean. I think that's actually what George means. I think that's always been my interpretation.
Prophecy has always been.
But yes,
I guess what I'm saying is that the way A Feast for Crows and Dance of Dragons goes, I don't quite see how that works. But we'll see. And then a younger queen will come along and take everything from her and defeat, and cast her down. Now, it then goes on, and when your tears have drowned you, and it clearly implies in the book that Cersei will outlive her children. She will be destroyed by the death of her children, which is a big thing, and that's not explicit here.
I think it is implied by the way that she looks, because when she says gold shall be their shroud, she goes into a very sort of sorrowful, dramatic, and gives Cersei a very portentous look.
Yeah.
So I think it's heavily implied, but whether they're going to get around to it with the structure there... Yeah.
And then finally finishes with the Valonqor, which Cersei later found out is a Valyrian word for little brother, will strangle the life out of her and kill her. And that... Charming, and very important for how Cersei proceeds once this come leaping back into her head. And it's gone, or at least they haven't shown it, and I'm dubious that they're going to show it. I think they've decided. I've heard maybe there are fans who have problems with it, but as I said in that when we discussed the impressions, I've always said, like, you have to focus on the fact that she says it's something she hasn't thought about in ages. It's not really been anything that's been guiding her beyond a very subtle subconscious way. It's only in A Feast for Crows where she starts obsessing about it.
Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with various things going on. I don't think
it's been there all the time. It's just maybe at the back of her mind.
After this, we go straight to Cersei going to the Great Sept, and we're told about how, for the last couple of weeks, there's been lords from all corners of Seven Kingdoms riding into King's Landing, as as we said, the Seven Kingdoms are like the size of Cornwall these days. And we have a discussion, and that discussion changes a lot. It loses some things I loved. It loses, for example, it's told in the book from Jaime's point of view, and Jaime has been sleepless for several days, insisting on standing vigil over his father. And you have a wonderful scene with fellow Kingsguard knights, including one Loras Tyrell, so not on the Kingsguard, on the show, kind of telling him, go sleep, we'll stand vigil for you, and it's a lovely little bit, because you have this thing where you see, Loras Tyrell is a chivalrous guy, and he has this sort of arrogance, and he has these issues with the Lannisters and all these things, but he's kind of a decent kid at the heart of it.
But Jaime obviously feels very guilty and will not let anyone else take over.
But then
they play up the guilt a little bit here in the confrontation, and although it comes out more because Cersei is pushing it on him, basically saying that, Tyrion killed our father on purpose. You killed him by mistake because you let Tyrion out. And my biggest problem with it is Jaime's focus on, now that our father is gone, they're all out there to tear us down, to rip us apart, to take everything from us. He's all of a sudden become very much focused on the Lannisters again. And in the books, by this time, he has started to become a proper Kingsguard who sets aside his family to more of a degree, at least, than he's done before. Here he's
very focused on it.
He's very focused on it. And this is the guy who in the books, was completely, screw everyone else, let's get married and tell everyone, the children are ours, and very unconcerned with what people would think about them and what could happen to them. And now he's being entirely on Cersei's sort of paranoia, let's stick together, and it's weird. It seems like he's just borrowed too much of her opinions and lost a lot of his own on the way.
Yeah, I mean, he sounds more paranoid than she does at this particular stage, which is interesting, and it's definitely a choice.
Bit of
other elements that disappeared, for example, they lost some of the macabre elements. They lost the rotting of Tywin's body.
They didn't give him glowy eyes, though.
Which, I mean, the loss of Tywin's rotting at least says, for those people who absolutely insist, David and Dan don't care if Oberyn allegedly poisoned Tywin. I certainly don't care, because Oberyn didn't poison Tywin, but in my opinion. But so I guess that's something. If you want to take what they do as having any signs of anything,
which you shouldn't anyway.
But you shouldn't, because they would say, "Oh, what's an unnecessary complication?" And it's go. But in any case, they lose that. And to me, it wasn't about poisoning. It was the thematic point.
Yeah. About
how the greatest man in 1,000 years will still rot and be food for the worms at the end of it. It's a Hamlet I knew him Horatio moment where you realize that we all, turn to dust, and it doesn't matter what you do in life. Yeah, it's a solid scene. It's not anything exceptional.
Yeah.
And then after this, of course, we have the result of the funeral feast afterward, where we see various lords, and Cersei's just ignoring Pycelle. Kevin shows up, and Lancel. We haven't seen him in a while. Lancel.
I did like his performance.
Eugene Simon did a very fine...
it's not the Lancel, the very frail Lancel from the books. He looks quite healthy.
He looks like he's bulked up.
He looks
like
more bulked up than he was. So he's clearly
pretty buff.
Yeah, he's been working out with those sparrows.
Yeah.
Not lying in bed and becoming extremely frail and sick from his wounds. So, but he's more of a overt fanatic, but he captured that pretty well, and
I agree.
The way he's implying to Cersei that I've been confessing my sins. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. They know everything about us, and you should probably be confessing too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it captures some of what actually happens. Lancel does sort of talk about how Septon helped bring him back from the brink of death, and how he spoke to him, all sorts of things. But Cersei, he doesn't go so explicitly like you should go and confess. And
no. I mean, the problem, as we will see as the storyline develops, is that they've certainly abandoned subtlety when it comes to...
What's going on?
It wasn't too much here, but as it goes on, the whole religious angle, they push it very much more.
Very strongly. And to the point where, as I said, where Kevin comes in and says, he apologizes for how Lancel's behaving, he's become Sparrow, and he's running around like bloody sackcloth.
At the funeral feast.
At the funeral feast. He's a huge embarrassment if you think about it for the Lannisters. Why isn't Kevin saying, you go back to Casterly Rock, get out, until you kind of get right in the head? It's a bit odd.
He should have that amount of control, at the very least, barring him from the Red Keep or something.
Yeah, if you're going to be a scandal to your family, a shame to your family, So it's a bit odd. I mean, obviously, when the Lancel, again, in the book, is very frail still, and not... I mean, he's not wearing sackcloth. He's become religious, but he's not gone so far. There's a longer story for him in the novel, and there's some other things that happen, but they've obviously, again, as I said in our impression piece, they've cut out certain things and that's fine. Cutting things, for the most part, is probably the best tactic to kind of get across the story.
But you can end up in situations where it doesn't quite jive with how other characters are reacting.
Yeah, exactly. So Kevin, it was good to see him, though, certainly. And I think that covers Cersei. So we'll move
King's
on.
Landing
That covers
us as well.
Yeah, that does cover King's Landing. So we'll move on to the next. Next would be, I guess, Tyrion and Varys, and
let's move over to Essos
over to Pentos. A great shot by Michael Slovis, and I said this, I think, in our first episode of looking at Pentos through that hole in the box as Tyrion's being carried along. That was a lovely little shot. The performances are good. Everything is fine until that moment when we both looked at one another and we're like, WTF. Yeah. Because Varys has suddenly a very different history from what we know from novels. In the novels, he's a pickpocket, boy prostitute, trying to get by, and gets some people angry and gets beaten up, and a young, snot-nosed, bravos of high opinion of himself named Illyrio Mopatis ends up sort of rescuing him and becoming best friends with him, and they start this career path. Like, there's this trajectory that leads them both. I mean, leads certainly Illyrio to the very top, the pinnacle of what one could hope to achieve in Pentos. From such a lowly beginning, he's now a magister, good enough to marry a kinswoman of the Prince of Pentos. And Varys ends up becoming, as we know, the spy master to the king of the Seven Kingdoms. So, not bad.
And we don't know 100% in the novels precisely what drives them to start getting behind, taking care of Viserys and Dany, for example, helping them out, and then the plotting that they are doing in the novels, which is entirely different than where it turns out that, they have this young boy that they claim is Rhaegar's son, presumed the Aegon that was presumed dead, and that they are have trained to become the next king. And this is obviously that plot line is completely gone.
I was thinking about this. Is it completely? I mean, technically, they could just decide to throw it into the 6th season all of a sudden. Like, if HBO twists their arm and gets them to go 9 seasons, they'll have to throw in something. But
it's gonna be grafted on. It's not gonna make sense.
No,
they're gonna have to retcon. Yes, I can't see it. But basically, the problem here is that now they're casting Varys and Illyrio as part of a group of people who were concerned with how Robert was mismanaging Westeros.
Indeed.
And then, which suggests that, so there wasn't really any involvement from Varys with Aerys then, perhaps?
Yeah.
They seem to have dropped that element entirely. Instead, it's just Robert's mismanaging and them working for restoring the Targaryen to the throne and, saving our country.
Okay.
It's baffling. It's a simplification that...
It's an extreme simplification.
That just doesn't make sense unless they are... I mean, they have to be cutting out vast amounts of backstory.
Like, why would Illyrio care about Robert? I mean, in the Seven Kingdoms, what is it that he sees? Now, obviously, he could be a lighting. Well, we could see he's going to be a disaster. Something has to be done. And Illyrio sees it. He has to be done because, hey, I can make a lot of money. I guess that's the prosaic thing is Illyrio wants money. And Varys...
But apparently it's just out of the goodness of his heart. Because powerful people, the wrong sort of people are in power and abusing, the poor small folk, and now we need to put the proper king on the throne in Westeros. And why Westeros? Why?
Excuse me. Not fond of it. Not fond of it at all. It's just... I would have preferred that they just retained something to keep it a bit more mysterious, because there's all sorts of debates about Varys, and I think some of those debates are dead as far as the show is concerned. One of the popular theories is that he is himself a descendant of Targaryens, specifically the Blackfyres, a bastard cadet branch of the Targaryen family. And the Blackfyres never mentioned. I mean, are we gonna mention it ever? The possibility? It does not matter. Is that their bit of? And here's a complex twist where he reveals and all along he's been a Targaryen.
They have mentioned the Golden, or no?
I have a recollection of the Golden Compass mentioned
but
once.
Something about them breaking the contract, right? Or no?
Not on the show.
No.
No. But I think they have been mentioned in passing.
They have been mentioned, but probably they're not going to make use of them either.
So I don't know. Lots of questions. Lots of things that are weird. Like, how does this fit? How does this fit with the Illyrio and Varys scene beneath the Red Keep in the first season? How does this fit with Varys sending assassins after Dany when... That one I think you can explain by, he had to arrange it, but he's also the reason that Jorah learns in time to stop it.
Still risky.
So it is very risky.
Yeah.
I don't know. The scenes themselves, the acting is still it was really good, but it's a change. We can see that Varys instead of Illyrio is going to be accompanying Tyrion. But
scuttling back and forth, then
they all have jetpacks now, so it's okay. Let's move on then to Meereen. Now, Meereen has a lot of... I mean, it opens with the spectacular visual effects of the harpy being brought down. That was a great shot.
That's a really nice shot.
Really nicely done shot. And it leads into a scene that is, I think... it's nice of them to kind of show and introduce the Sons of the Harpy with showing this thing that it sort of happens off camera.
Yeah.
In the books, with one of the members of the Unsullied being murdered by a Son of the Harpy. They changed its name. It was Stalwart Shield in the books, and it's something.
White Rat.
Was it White Rat?
Yes.
Was it but did they? Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
it was White Rat. I don't know.
Don't ask me.
So I like that. Although one notes that there was an opportunity for more nudity as he kind of wanders through the alleyways. Yeah. But they don't rush it, which I appreciated that. But they could take the time to do that.
It's just awkward what it leads to.
Well, at least for the first thing it leads to is the scene with Dany learning about it and being very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
In her response, she wants to rile the Sons of the Harpy. She wants to lash out so she can chop off their heads.
Yeah.
And that is fine.
Yeah.
But then it leads to a very odd little Missandei where they still seem to be playing the whole.
They want to play with this potential romance there, and apparently they feel that the romance would be kind of dead in the water if Missandei knew that Grey Worm had nothing at all under his skirt. So they're playing with
the pants in the skirt.
Okay, well.
But no, it's
no junk whatsoever. So,
but that is a very it's very, and don't kill me. That's a very normative view of relationships between people, because the idea that the fellow has to have a penis.
Well, I'm saying they seem to feel that way.
Yes, they seem to feel that way. It's kind of funny that they're not, that they've kind of played the romance, but Missandei kind of. And they're playing with the idea that, of course, if he doesn't have anything, then if he's a eunuch, then there can't be any real romantic relationship.
So she has him asking, has Missandei asking Grey Worm, why would an unsullied go to a prostitute? And he says,
I don't know.
I don't know.
It is odd. I mean, that is something I believe you put out. Dany actually asked him, why would he be there? And he actually says...
He explains that, it's for comfort.
It's the comfort of
which we saw in the scene, that it was just for being comforted, which was a nice touch that I appreciate that they left that scene, or that they left that element in and showed it. I thought that was nice.
But then he has no idea, which is kind of... to continue playing up this, will they, won't they, does he, doesn't he, I don't know why we're stretching it out as they are.
Maybe are they supposed to have, missed chopping off the right bits on him for some reason? They couldn't find it.
I don't know. I just find it really weird. And then we have the return of Hisdar and Daario from their mission.
Fortunately, in the case of Hisdar.
Which is successful, apparently. But then Hisdar keeps wanting the fighting pits reopened. And the fighting pits are very important to the Meereenese. They are a sort of a religious experience, and it has obviously ties to how the Romans saw gladiatorial combat. That there was they got it from the Etruscans, and the Etruscans featured them in
it was
funeral
very
games.
Strongly religious to start with.
Yes,
eventually it became more of
a. Sorry, we got the flu from hell right after London, and it's still flu. We still have a latent cough from it. And then, so, I mean, that works, that fits properly. She doesn't want to open it. She thinks it's preposterous. She thinks it's an evil thing. And then you go to the bedroom scene with Daario. Now, this is, again, another moment for people to admire a good-looking naked guy.
And watch how Emilia Clarke is clutching the bed sheet over her breasts. While, whereas Dany in the books is, she'll sit around casually naked. She doesn't take nudity as sexual. Her background among the Dothraki and all, she has come to desexualize nudity.
Yeah, but that is very much.
And there's this naked guy standing around, and she's clutching like that.
It was cold up on the top of the pyramid, and Daario was just being tough and wasn't concerned about shrinkage. Obviously, he's very comfortable in his skin. It's Hollywood. It is a Hollywood convention. But when the actress
and apparently somewhere along the lines, Emilia Clarke slipped in a no nudity clause into her.
I won't go so far, but they might be like, you get it once a season or something like this.
It's not like we've complained about some of the nudity, but here
this is where it stands out to you.
People are in bed. They've just had sex.
One of them is
standing around casually naked. Just let her be casually naked and don't zoom in on the tits or anything. Just let it.
Just be natural.
Just be natural.
I agree. It's just a silly little Hollywood thing, and I don't mind. I mean, it is feel unequal. Like we have one actor saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it," and the other actor says, "Well, I don't really feel comfortable." But that's on them. Then the actor sorted out and whatever. We get new background for Dario, and I thought it was fine, the idea, but he started up as
Nothing
a fighter.
from the books. We don't have a background at all on him.
I don't think he was a pit fighter in the book. I don't
very
think
much
that's his origin. But
he's too flamboyant. It doesn't seem to fit.
And then, of course, Danny goes visiting the dragons, and finally, Viserion, Rhaegal, they finally get their names mentioned on the show.
And they're so pissed off that it's taken this long that they threaten to torture.
I thought this effects. I mean, you can't. There was recently an article. Yeah, there was recently an article discussing that every season. I mean, they have become incredibly more complicated with each season. How much rendering time and how many? I think they said last season the dragons had 74 distinct textures that go into them, and now I think they said it was more like 740 textures.
Ooh.
And various things have been changed. Their scales are a bit stiffer and don't flex as much, and that actually adds rendering time when they're moving around.
It's amazing that they can do that on TV.
It is amazing. That will always be an awesome
the best
bit.
part. And their acting is always top notch.
Yeah, it absolutely is great. The dragons are great performers. Yeah. All right, this then leads us to the wall to discuss. The wall, I think it's, while Varys and Tyrion were great, I think the wall in general is turning out, I'll say, across these 4 episodes, to be the most interesting area. The area that I've enjoyed the most out of those 4 episodes, and I think it's
a little rushed in the first 2.
A lot of things are rushed. Yeah. I feels, and that's the main thing I'd say about the first episode, and I'll say it about the second episode as well. It's always been the case in every season, pretty much, we said, the first episode is always stuffed with a lot of short scenes to catch you up, and the next episode is going to feel the same way as well. There's so much story, but it takes 2 episodes for them, or most of 2 episodes to kind of get you caught up on everything.
And the wall, obviously, they left some material from, they weren't done with the Storm of Swords even. So here, they get through the Storm of Swords material in the first 2.
The first 2 episodes.
In the first 2 episodes. But they felt there is a lot of compression going on.
There's a lot of compression.
You can feel that things move very quickly. There are some scenes that don't come out as momentous as they should be later on, I think.
But I think it worked well here. Pretty faithful to a novel in this episode, where you've got the whole thing where Stannis is already looking towards what comes next. He's interested in Jon. You do get the awkwardness in the book. It's in the books, Davos is not present. Davos has been left behind to do some other stuff. He's been left at Eastwatch, and he's been tasked to do other things. And here he's present, and it felt kind of like we need to figure out how to have him not just standing around.
I mean, we had that in the last episode of the previous season as well, where he's talking for Stannis, and it kind of feels a little bit like Stannis is sort of, I'm too good for you to sort of to speak directly to me, and that doesn't feel quite right. He's a very rigid person, but the idea that he'd have an official speaker that sort of, you can't approach me directly. It's not.
It's a bit of awkwardness, or they kind of want to feature both actors, and they divide up lines between them, basically. So
it just gives the a bit of an odd dynamic to some
but
of those
the basics of it are right. They fit very well, and we have Melisandre kind of being very interested in Jon Snow.
Very overtly
interested, asking if he's a virgin or not. Yeah. I mean, kind of right
off. That'll make it easier.
And of course, now that you've seen, was it, I guess, season 4? Was it where he sends Gendry off? Season 3 even. Gendry goes off in season 3.
He's been rowing since then.
He's been rowing. Yeah. He's been rowing. Those arms are going to be ripped. We've seen how she does what she does. So she's implicated. She's said as much. It's sexual with magic that she uses to create her shadows. And I guess she wants Jon for the same purpose.
Lucky for her that he likes redheads. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Now, and then we come to Jon pleading with Mance. Now, here's where my position. In the book, Mance refuses to bend the knee to Stannis. Yeah. He would rather die. Stannis actually doesn't want to kill him, necessarily. He says, he's a stubborn, prideful man. he may force me to, give him to the fires, and then I'll have to look to someone else, some other leaders.
Which is interesting. We actually ended up having a bit of a discussion about this beforehand, because technically, Mance's life is forfeit.
Yeah.
He is an oathbreaker and a deserter to the Night's Watch. So Stannis in the book says, your brothers, he tells Jon,
they all want him dead.
They want him dead. Of course, he's not only has he deserted the Night's Watch, he's gone and proclaimed himself king beyond the wall.
Yeah.
Like they're enemy number one. Stannis seems to feel that it would be better in the books if he could get Mance. He seems willing to override the Night's Watch and basically say, I'm the king, I'm going to override you on this.
He's my prisoner.
He's my prisoner, yeah. If he bends the knee and through that gives me the wildlings. I mean, he doesn't want wildlings on the other side of the wall either.
Sure. This is part of his pragmatism, but occasionally shows up because he's so obsessed with getting the throne and defending the realm.
Yeah.
But he is willing to bend a little bit, and and as he says, he forgave those who followed his brother because they threw a lot with him. He forgave, but he doesn't forget.
No.
He doesn't forget.
So he would never trusted Mance or anything like that, but he's willing to use him to get the wildlings.
Just as he said, I mean, in the book at least, he's using Melisandre as he sees it, to get what he wants, at whatever the cost. So for me, the prideful Mance who won't bend the knee, even in the face of a terrible death, is correct.
Yes, I can agree with you on the basics of the scene, that the attitude that Mance puts forward fits probably what his discussion with not Jon but Stannis in the books, because Jon doesn't get to handle that part himself. My problem is the dissonance of seeing Ciarán Hinds, who, the way he acts it, the way he sounds, his body language, none of that feels like, it feels so far from the image that I have of Mance that it's, for me, the scene was still very dissonant.
I can see. It was mentioned way back that Dominic West, best known from The Wire, I guess, mentioned that he was offered the part, or at least was offered a chance to read for the part, and he wasn't interested in doing it. But his McNulty, he's a person who can capture the roguish side of things.
I think, even in this situation, I would, especially talking to Jon, maybe not talking to Stannis for example, but talking to Jon, I would have liked to see, there should have been some of that melancholy there.
Yeah.
That's the big part, that, there's not a melancholy bone in Ciarán Hinds' performance of Mance Rayder.
No,
I think it should have been, the pride should have been mingled with that. I mean, also remember in the books as well, not here, he's he's just lost his wife. She died in...
And he has a son.
And he has a son.
An son, so he has something, he has a lot weighing on him.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I can see where you're coming from on that. And then obviously we come to the death, and as we said, it's clear this is a part where they've cut. There's no room, unless you want to believe that she can actually make people into puppets who say exactly what she wants and exactly the way she wants. There's no way that he's not dead. Mance is dead.
That is Mance Rayder.
And that whole storyline from A Dance with Dragons is that is about Mance not being dead.
Dead.
That's dead.
Yeah, that storyline is dead. Mance is dead. That storyline is dead.
So that's interesting, but
they also cut, which I thought that could have been a nice touch to have, because in the burning of Mance, they also have, that is when Stannis lets the wildlings through who have remained on the other side of the wall, and they have to go and burn some weirwood tokens and things to point out sort of this is all about R'hllor, just like they were burning bits of the Seven, and so they just have the wildlings watching here rather than any of those sort of sacrifices.
I recall the final episode of if Stannis mentions in episode 10 that but he's going to have them convert. I don't think that even comes up at all.
No, it may not be, which is odd because it's a big part of it. I mean, he wants everyone who follows him. He's going to have these men fighting for him, he says. Yeah. And he should have wanted to have them converted. Yeah.
All right, and that leaves us one last little bit to discuss, the Vale. Did I just start it? Yeah. Okay. And the Vale that features first. I think a fun little scene with poor Robin.
Yeah, no, that one's
You
not
know,
bad.
being complete klutz, not able to fight, and
Gruff,
Lord Royce
Lord Royce,
gruff, kind of. So that was amusing. It was nicely done.
Yeah.
And then we have this mysterious journey, and the less said about that right now, the better. You'll find out more soon about what's going on. Obviously, there's a land far
They're
away.
very much playing up the whole Sansa kind of Littlefinger mentoring Sansa and sort of checking off her progress. Are you being a good little spy right now, basically? Are you getting all these details and such? But that is in the books as well. He does sort of quiz her on things.
Yeah.
I think perhaps that all of their interactions seem to come down to, there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
So maybe pushing it a little much, but overall it's pretty good.
Pretty interesting. And then obviously the other scene is they kind of go from Pod from Baird and to Pod and Brienne sail out to help their horses in the Vale.
Yeah.
And it's quite clear to me, but the speech here that Brienne has about how, you know, all the good lords are dead and the rest of the lords of the reign are monsters is kind of signaling, you know, she's kind of done.
Yeah.
She doesn't think she's going to find Sansa. She doesn't really know quite what to do. And everything is kind of crappy. And I think to me, I take it's signaling that they're preparing a new story for her.
Yeah, because the path that she's on in A Feast for Crows, her search, where she's spending all her time in the Riverlands, basically searching for Sansa, I think very much is that the speech signals that they're cutting out. She's kind of lost hope here, and they're changing their focus with her.
Yeah.
They're changing her attitude to things, making her even less like the Brienne of the book. So she's very rough around the edges. Compared to.
No, she is very rough around the edges. So, wow, I think that covers everything. I would say overall the episode is it's just fine. It's a steady. It's a salt. It has the same problem that like pretty much every first episode has. It has too much going on because they have to catch up everyone. So and there's nothing really they can do. It's the nature of the beast. That's what I've said before, and I'll stick by it. There are scenes that aren't that great. There are scenes that are pretty good. It's Game of Thrones, and of course there's some real spectacle, and there's some nudity. So you know what you're gonna get when you turn on.
And about, I think, 2, possibly 3 eye rolls.
2 or 3 eye rolls. Okay. That's your new rating scale?
Yeah.
How many?
I'm working with that one so far.
All right. 2 or 3 eye rolls, says Linda. So until next week, we hope maybe we'll manage to get some other videos in interim, including something about the chapter George released from The Winds of Winter.
Yeah.
But maybe the Ebola flu will prevent us. I don't know. But until then, have a fun time discussing Game of Thrones and Sunrise and Fire with fellow fans.